That wasn't a negotiation, it was an ultimatum. 15 minutes, either you cooperate or you disappear. That's how the United States treated the leadership of the Venezuelan regime after the capture of Nicolas Maduro. And the most important thing here isn't the threat itself. It's what it reveals about who betrayed whom, who was already negotiating before, and who is now trying to rewrite their own history to survive politically. In recent days, a report by the British newspaper The Guardian brought to light an explosive detail. According to the publication, Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's deputy dictator and then vice president of Venezuela, allegedly received a direct message from the United States right after Maduro's capture. The message was simple, brutal, and direct. Either she cooperated with the transition imposed by Washington, or she would be removed from the process for good, eliminated. 15 minutes to decide, not even room for ambiguity. At first glance, the report seems to confirm an American show of force. But when you look at the full context, what emerges is not just external coercion, it's a desperate internal effort to control the narrative. Because this leak doesn't look like a denunciation, it looks like a preemptive defense. Delcy Rodriguez is currently facing accusations within Venezuela itself. Part of the regime accuses her of having orchestrated, along with other members of the hardline Chavista inner circle, the handover of Maduro to preserve the system and take power. The narrative of "we were threatened" works as a political shield. It shifts the blame. We weren't accomplices, we were victims. There was no betrayal, it was survival. Because nothing suggests improvisation, quite the opposite. According to information also published by the Wall Street Journal, there was already a plan in place for Maduro's departure. Washington wanted to avoid a civil war, total collapse of the Venezuelan state, or an armed fragmentation of the territory. The idea was clear: remove Maduro, keep the structure, change the face of the regime. Maduro would have received a proposal for a negotiated exit, asylum in allied countries, United Arab Emirates, Russia, Turkey. Even Brazil appears as a possibility behind the scenes. He refused. He bet that he would survive. He bet wrong. When the American operation was carried out, Delcy Rodriguez was not in Caracas. He was on Margarita Island, far from the center of power, out of reach of any immediate popular reaction. A few hours after Maduro's capture, she returns and takes political control. Her brother, Jorge Rodriguez, consolidates his institutional position. The succession happens too quickly to be improvised. That's why the 15-minute narrative needs to be read carefully. She doesn't explain what happened. She tries to justify it. She tries to erase the increasingly strong impression inside and outside Venezuela that there was direct internal collaboration. And the subsequent behavior confirms this. Despite the aggressive public speech, Delcy continues to follow the agenda imposed by Washington. One of the first signs came with the accelerated release of political prisoners. 800 so far. The American president himself publicly announced the measure, thanking the Venezuelan leadership for the humanitarian gesture. It wasn't a request. It was an order carried out. And since then, dozens of prisoners have started to be released. Argentinians, diplomats, opposition members, embassy staff, and others were detained on charges of collaborating with the United States. Internal reports indicate that sectors of the Venezuelan Catholic Church are being used as intermediaries to pressure the families of political prisoners. In some cases, demanding silence, political withdrawal, or money in exchange for information or promises of release. A complete moral collapse of institutions that should protect, not extort. Meanwhile, the regime insists on the official narrative. There are no political prisoners, only common criminals. The math doesn't add up. On one hand, the regime releases prisoners, and they were political prisoners. On the other hand, it denies that there were political prisoners. The numbers contradict each other. The images contradict the narrative. And even with this selective repression, the signs of erosion continue. Small demonstrations are starting to reappear, discreet, localized, calling for total liberation, calling for real elections, calling for an end to fear. The regime releases some to survive, but keeps many to rule through terror. And the second major turning point for Venezuela is in Cuba. Maduro's fall cut off the main lifeline of the Cuban regime, subsidized oil. And without it, the island suffered an energy collapse. Blackouts became daily, then weekly. Now, they're structural. Not even Havana's hotels are spared anymore. Something unprecedented. Tourism, the country's last significant source of income, began to collapse. Cuba tried to import oil from Africa. 17,000 tons that keeps the power grid running for just over a day. Mexico signals that it may also stop supplying, and Washington is considering a full naval blockade to prevent any fuel from entering. The goal is clear. Either the regime falls or the country goes dark, literally. And here comes an uncomfortable but inevitable question. If the United States managed to remove Maduro without war, without a ground invasion, without immediate regional collapse, why wouldn't it do the same in Cuba? The answer is being tested right now. Behind-the-scenes reports indicate that Washington has already approached members within the Cuban regime who are willing to cooperate in exchange for political survival. None of this is improvised. It's a template. Meanwhile, in Brazil, the government chooses an awkward silence. The country abstains from international votes that condemn human rights violations in Venezuela and Iran. Lula isolates himself morally. Lula maintains dialogue with Washington, has a visit planned, tries to preserve regional influence, but carries the burden of having supported regimes that are now collapsing. The final question is not whether Delcy Rodriguez was threatened. The real question is this: how many within the regime had already decided to turn in Maduro even before the threat existed? How many are still negotiating their own survival while pretending to resist? And how many regimes in the region have realized that the model has changed? Because what we're witnessing is not just the end of a dictator, it's the consolidation of a new way to overthrow regimes. Total economic pressure, energy isolation, internal co-optation, and surgical replacement of political leadership. No tanks, no occupation, no epic speeches. The story of Venezuela is still far from over, but one thing is already clear. When the ultimatum comes, those who are really in charge don't ask twice. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, leave a like on the video, and you can become a member of our channel and support my work here on this platform. I'm Shimon Oliveira, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.